sadhana and satsang, and the words to leave us with are devotion and patience in this process. We can do this, and we can do it together. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Ananda. Well, as you know, life is full of tests. I don't think any of us would be here right now if we weren't going through one test or another. As Swami says, either tests that are outside of ourselves, friction in our lives, the neighbor's dog, maybe an in-law, or something that's grating at us on the outside, or our own inner tests, which are our unwillingness to move towards that which we seek, maybe habits that are stored up from the past that aren't serving us anymore. I remember when I was in high school, test is a big word, right? And I don't remember a single test that I prepared for. I thought about it yesterday. I was thinking, was there one that I really felt good going into? And I couldn't think of one. And it was interesting because, you have, through middle school and high school, 4 to 6 years of opportunity to learn the lesson. Oh, I should really study for this one. But I never did. And then, of course, as Swami says in another teaching, there's one of these Sunday service topics is on courage, divine courage, and he says, blind courage goes into battle, or into the restaurant, buys everything that it wants, and then is left horror-stricken with the bill, And that's always how I was. You'd get there with the pencil, and oh goodness, Sometimes I could get my way through it, but it was still the feelings that you would get, the nervousness, the shaky feeling. And you think, why wouldn't I prepare for that? Well, I had the chance to meet somebody at the farm a couple of weeks ago who was coming for one of our prana cafes that we do on Saturdays. And he just happened to tell me something that was really interesting that I didn't know was going to be connected to this talk. But he said he was asking his daughter, what is procrastination to you? And she said, as a teenager would say, it's not caring enough. And I thought that was so deep. And then I told that to a friend of mine, and they said, well, that might have been her answer to anything. Oh, I don't care enough. I'm a teenager. But it really is. There's a kernel of truth in that. We have our tests in life, and what is it that keeps us from rising to that occasion? There is an unwillingness that we have to go towards God in many cases. Years ago, when I first started working at East West Bookshop, I met this healer, and it was one of my roles to vet the healers and readers to see if they were worth their salt or something like that. And she explained to me that we each have an intention in life to move towards something, and for some people it may be to have better health or better concentration for their startup enterprise or whatever it is. And yet we also have all of these myriad counter intentions that we carry with us. Many of them sabotage that one intention that we have. So that seems to me to be one of the main things that we should explore today about how we meet our tests is, how do we want to meet our tests? How do we ignite that desire to overcome these tests? When Swami Kriyananda first came to study with Yogananda, he was, as he said, riddled with doubts. He was very intellectual, and spirituality was a mental exercise, but he knew that he wanted something deeper. And Yogananda said, get devotion. And he gave Swamiji a harmonium to chant. And the word devotion can be a little bit abstract, but one way to think of it is that willingness. We have to establish ourselves firmly the desire to want to know God. Otherwise, it's going to be so difficult for us to make that main intention that we have in our hearts the focus of our lives. So naturally, as I was thinking about that, I chanted a lot yesterday in preparation for this talk. And it really does, when we can ignite the power, the dynamo of the heart, we can do anything. That willingness is so key. these failed tests, as I experienced in high school, can really be grist for the mill for us. They can propel us forward, and they can be lessons. And then I reflected again yesterday that, oh, well, I'm doing Sunday service talk. Well, that is a test. And I'm happy to say that I prepared for the test this time. And really, unlike schoolwork, which was never an interest to me, being of service and sharing these teachings is of great interest to me. And so I actually prepared. So that's kind of an aside, is find that which you are truly interested in this life, and you will rise to the occasion for that. The two things that I think are indispensable in overcoming the inner tests that we have, those temptations, those desires that take us away from God, number one for me is satsang. And in the Shastras in India, satsanga is repeated again and again as so important. And what does that mean? Well, Yogananda said environment is much stronger than our own willpower. And we can delude ourselves to think that, oh, I've got this affirmation or this meditation in the morning, I'm going to go out into the world and change the world. But unless we really find ourselves and align ourselves with a group of people that also want that flame will eventually, we're like little saplings. And don't they need to be fenced in from the deer? Don't they need to be put a T-post on it like William's always doing at the farm to keep them strong? That's what our spiritual family is for. There's been many times where I lose the desire to meditate or to go into that higher vibration. And it's so much easier, as the affirmation says, for us to go back to what we're familiar with, to the easy way, put on Netflix and get the ice cream, It's so easy, right? But one thing that has been a huge blessing for me over the last 10 years is when you live in spiritual community, you can actually look out the door or, as the case may be, go over and spend time in the community. And even if you're not meditating, you're surrounded by people who are. I mean, the chances are, at least, much more than 50% that day meditated. And if you spend enough time, your ego will become actually your friend. There is such thing as the spiritual ego. I learned that early on when I was starting on this path. Like Swamiji, one of my first tests that I had to overcome was to quit smoking. I don't know how many of you can relate to that experience, but I smoked for a couple of years. And, it's so easy if you don't have a support group to say, oh, well, that is a good intention, but maybe, I'm going through a hard time. Maybe later I'll do that. But I remember I actually announced to my friends, I'm going to quit smoking. And then I immediately felt the fear of the ego saying, oh, are you going to be able to hold that up? Are you going to be able to do that? And my ego didn't want to look foolish, right? So my ego was actually helping me in this case. I put it out there on the line. And so I knew that they would, oh, hey, Mark, are you still not smoking? And, I stumbled maybe for 2 months. And like Swami, I just knew that, because I'd started meditating, I knew that how could I be a meditator if I can't even sit still for 10 minutes without wanting a cigarette? How could I do that? It's ridiculous. And then I see these smug friends of mine walking around, hey, you still not smoking? And I thought, I have to do this. And when that first, temptation fell, this wave of energy went through me. And I thought, wow, I can do this. What else can I do? What else can I accomplish? So when these tests come up to us in life, and they can seem like very strong temptations, as some of the great masters in India used to put them, wine, sex, and greed, some of the three main things that keep us in this world. Just remember, it's to not focus on if you failed in that moment, but to focus on, no, I have not yet succeeded. To keep that emphasis and that focus on where you're going, not what just happened in that moment. Swami Kriyananda said that progress, spiritual progress, or progress of any kind, is always directional. Focus on that current going through the river and not all these endless eddies that are cluttering the banks. Be that center and keep moving forward, and you'll get there. Swami leaves us with the word patience. Isn't that so important? Have patience with ourselves in this process. We are talking about millions of years of stored up karma and bad habits and negative thoughts, and what we want to do, what our minds want is to be there right away, to finish the painting, make it a masterpiece right away. But it's stroke by stroke. We have to stay present in this precious moment. Take that stroke. Sure, the next day you might spill the paint all over the painting and have to start over, but one stroke at a time. When I met Swami Kriyananda, he said the same thing to me that he said in the end of this, end of the reading. He said, someday you'll say, gee, I'm not the same person I was anymore. It will happen. I was listening to a talk on this subject from Swami Anandi, who just passed away recently. And she mentioned something that Swami said to her that I hadn't heard before. And people will get discouraged when they're only feeling a trickle of joy, maybe in their meditations, maybe for years. I know when I first came onto the path, I was having these ecstatic meditations where I could almost count on it. After 28 minutes, I would just be in the zone. And I thought, wow, this is so great that I found meditation. It's so easy, and this is wonderful. I'm going to probably be a monk, and I'll follow in the Buddha's footsteps, And and then dry periods will come, and you don't feel the way that you felt. And I really took that for granted. What Swami said is that when we're in these bodies, these physical bodies, the feeling, any feeling, whether it's an emotion or whether it's a divine experience, is muted. The physical body is like a buffer. We can't really feel the full extent of our consciousness while we're in these bodies. So for those of you who are feeling a trickle of joy or peace, don't get discouraged. When we drop this body, any feeling, any consciousness that we are manifesting right now, we'll really feel who we are, and we'll feel where we are. And the same goes for those who live their whole lives in anger and irritation and judgment of others. They don't know what suffering they will experience when they drop that body and they have to feel those feelings 100%. Right now we have this little sliver of knowing what our astral and our causal bodies actually are. And so take care of this precious moment that we have to make spiritual progress. Even if it's a little trickle of joy that we feel, move in that direction of that trickle. We have the power with our awareness to focus on what we want to focus on. So we can magnify that trickle by our own awareness, even if it stays a trickle the rest of our lives. Oh, well, I spent 30, 40 years practicing Kriya Yoga. I felt a little trickle of joy. Well, we focus on that, one-pointed. Don't give up. A saint is a sinner who never gave up. There's so many great examples of this topic in our path, and one that I know is very popular and struck many is a story that Yogananda told of one of his disciples who had a drinking problem, a big alcoholic problem. And Yogananda said that he used to, I guess this disciple told Yogananda his experience. He used to sit down at the end of his bed with a bottle of whiskey in one hand and his Kriya beads, his malas, in the other hand. And just to meditate on that example. Okay, sure, in that moment you could say, well, he's got the bottle and he's drunk. He failed. But look at the other hand. There was still that desire and that willingness to practice. And you know what happened? He dropped the bottle. I don't know how long it took. It doesn't matter. But the directional progress, he still wanted it. And that's how we have to be. You can have one foot in the world. You could spend 90% of your day on the computer and wasting your time, or being distracted, or eating that meal that you told yourself you weren't going to eat, or going to the bar, or whatever it is. But if there's even 1%, 10% that you have that desire, do that. And then the satsang piece, coming back to that. find somebody else. Find 2, 3, 4, come here. Find people who also have that, and it will magnify that experience that you have. That 1% will go to 5 when you can spend time with others who are wanting the same thing. It's really important. And then, just like this Kriya bond with the bottle in one hand and the mala in the other, never identify with your mistakes. They're temporary. They're in that moment, but there's always the next one, isn't there? There's always the next one to focus on. Never identify with them. They are not who you are. The scriptures say that you are the immortal Atman. You are that spark of the infinite. That's who you really are. And we lose sight of that, but that is our true nature. So when you go into a test, whether it be to give Sunday service or to take an actual test, bring God with you. God, I'm not going to do this test alone. I need your help. And if you focus on that, or even in the midst of a transgression where, I'm doing something I shouldn't be doing right now. Well, don't shy away from God. God already knows you're doing it. God's looking through your eyes. God is that consciousness. So say, oh God, here we go again. Here I am. At least you're here with me. You keep that connection going. And whatever the negative experience is of failing the test, God was with you there all along, and that's the goal. It's God remembrance. So I don't know what else there is to say. I mean, we have the gunas to talk about a little bit. And none of you being here are in the tamo guna reality. So take a deep breath. When Swami, I think it's on this piece of paper I have, when he discusses what it's like to be a person in whom tamoguna is uppermost, he says, quite ominously, no amount of teaching and no self-effort will serve any purpose. Time must simply pass as nature takes its course and brings that person gradually to the point where, after repeated disappointments and the slight glimmering of hope for greater understanding, the inner person finally emerges in the full dignity of a refined human being. Okay, we're past that. We will slump into that, certainly. I mean, when big traumas or things happen in our lives, tamoguna may predominate, but it's not who you are. Our environment, like Yogananda said, is stronger than our willpower. So what can we do about it? If you find yourself in that, not even having the desire to live a spiritual life, there are little things that we can do. You could tidy up the room. You can put on some uplifting music. These are things that take very little effort. They're not like sitting and meditating for an hour. You could pick that up. The flow of energy will start to carry you. There will be a flow of grace, because even if it looks mundane, like mowing the lawn, even if that looks mundane to you, it's moving in the right direction, and that's what this is all about. For most of us here, especially in the West, we manifest Rajoguna, that restless, ego embroiled in restless activity, and that's fine. We've got the energy, now we just have to focus it on God. That's where the chanting comes in. It's so simple. Even if you don't have a harmonium, you can say one of these chants that we have in the booklet in your mind. It's called japa. Repeat the names of God during the day. You can do that when you're driving. It's okay. You can do it with operating heavy machinery. You can do it in a board meeting on a Zoom call. It's definitely okay. Coming back in and touching in with God. And then, of course, number one is finding this a community, that satsang, and practicing Kriya Yoga is immensely helpful. I don't know how to explain it other than it gets the energy moving, it gets it flowing. And there are things that there's bad habits that we have. We don't have to really, with Kriya Yoga, you don't have to actually figure out what they are, identify them, and destroy them. You don't have to go through therapy about it. You can simply magnetize that spine and get the energy moving, and it'll take care of itself, really does. So sadhana and satsang, and the words to leave us with are devotion and patience in this process. We can do this, and we can do it together. As Swami said, many hands make a miracle. So I'm going to end with this reading from Whispers from Eternity by Paramahansa Yogananda. This is number 42, I Demand to Return Home. Impediments beware. Flee my path. I am homeward bound. Through the long corridors of time, stumbling often into pits of error, then lifted out by thy unseen hand, I have walked painfully. Discouraging darkness, barbed wire fences of habit, stony embankments of indolence, mountains of indifference, oceans of unfaithfulness, sirens of sense-longing may stand even now in my path, as if to prevent my onward march to thy palace. But a million kingdoms and sextillions of years of unblemished worldly happiness will never tempt me again to turn away from thee. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.
Thank you, Bhima.